Alright, well, I'll note that Laxia has basically had more than one tier list basically ready to basically go for here. He also had one for Inscriptions, so I figured, why not? Let's jump into this one and basically show it off. Now, to give a breakdown basically of what he's basically got here, I'll note he's basically, split, the physical, magical, mental, and, double, wild infusions basically into their own thing. That's the thing about wild infusions. They can be, multiple things, basically. So you can have, this one for, say, physicals, one for, mental, one for magical, or one that can basically double for both physical and mental, one for double for mental and magical, etc. Stuff like that. Um, and then, of course, there's also, the Shatter Affliction Rune that basically does all three for the rune casters. He's also got access to apparently a couple other heroes as well. He's also got the tame for I believe the Wildering Beast, as well as the one you basically get from Ungrel in Last Hope. Neither of which I really have used myself, but whatever, they're there. And it's also got the artifact ones the Wild Infusion that the Prismatic or Primal one I guess, Prismatic one over here, etc. Now of course I basically have my own guide basically on all this, so that's helpful. I know all about them basically. And just to sort of help me myself out again as well, let's bring up the wiki here because I'm not entirely sure what the icons basically all are, so let's make sure I get them all right. So, let's begin. So first things first, we basically have healing, regeneration, and the wild infusion is basically up for talking about here first, so let's get to them. Alright, so a note that basically for regeneration, I consider this to be one of the better inscriptions you basically get for your character. It's good for both arcane casters. It's good for warriors. It's basically good all around. And the reason it's good is basically heals you for quite a bit of healing over a course of time. It's not immediate like the healing infusion, but you get so much of it basically from regenerating your health back. And if you have good heal mod, or if you have a constant fight where you're basically constantly damage, you basically can heal up a lot from that as well. And there's also a chance to basically take advantage of regeneration, so you can double from that too, like the fungus category, for example. So where do I basically rank the Regeneration Infusion, I guess? And that's this one right here. So I consider Regeneration Rune to be like an S tier, inscription. Well, I would say S tier. It's actually more like A tier. It's not perfect because there is some things based to watch out for. The thing about the Regeneration Rune is that basically it will work off your healing mod, and if your healing mod is basically set to 0 for some reason, or if basically the enemies are basically messing with your healing, it's not that great, unfortunately. But it's still a very powerful infusion. Basically, can keep it working unabated from that sort of thing. So yeah, it's pretty powerful what it basically does, and definitely one of the better infusions to basically get. So a very good one to start with. And then we have healing basically to talk about as well. So healing is basically sort of regeneration is sort of instant cousin. I'll note that when you use the regeneration infusion, it basically takes a turn to use, and it'll basically won't hit you all at once. But the healing infusion here, this is basically an immediate one that basically can use before you do anything else, so it immediately heals you in combat. And it also has the added properties of basically removing diseases, wounds, and poison types. So that'd be say insidious poison, deep wounds, a blight disease from a ghoulie that just bit you or something like that. Essentially, it can wipe out a lot of stuff that can basically stop you from healing. So if you pair this with say regeneration infusion, you can use this to basically get rid of stuff that's basically hurting your heal mod, so that this basically hits you for full. Early on, as well as in the start of the game, you're probably more concerned about instantly dying because you're taking too much damage. So regeneration may not help you in that sort of situation, but healing will. And it's not something basically to discard here, but diseases, wounds, and poisons are more effective basically in the early game than it is later on. So you can basically hit for say 100 damage of poison damage in turn from a really bad poison. But with healing, you can basically get rid of that really real quick. Again, just the Regeneration Infusion, there's also tie-ins to other talents and stuff like that that can basically help you out. specifically like say like arcane blades and archmages, they basically have a like the Aegis category, which basically like upgrades their like damage shield when like you get heal effects and stuff like that. But grants there, it's actually grants. So let's just quickly edit that because I like to make sure my things are like written right. Grants a damage shield. Alright, so healing is definitely one of like the better infusions you can basically get for like, keeping yourself alive early on. Sometimes it can be better than like the Regeneration Infusion, though honestly I like to pair basically up, early on with like, the Regeneration to like, get the both basically have both infusions. After basically get to like, the later stage of the game, it's not as great, but it's still like, useful nonetheless. So definitely like, more of like a B tier one, I think this one, but it's still right up there as being like really, really good. Alright, this basically has like, wild infusions being listed here. And my guide, I think, basically has like, wild infusions next. Let's go for them. Alright, so wild infusions basically I have this written wrong, but was 1 or 2. Oh, I got that right, basically. 1 random effect, natural effect. I probably already have this basically like, written down. But basically the idea for like, the wild infusion, this is probably not the best like, writing for it, but on that basically has how it was like, written basically for it. The thing about the wild infusion is basically it'll remove like, one type of like, effect basically from your character that's basically listed as like what it can basically remove. Say you basically have like a wild infusion that basically removes like, physical effects, and you basically hit by like say like a stun in a daze. Basically what the wild infusion will basically do is it'll actually try and get rid of that stun or at daze with equal chance. And that's basically like, how basically obviously like, removing like, inscription effects work. If it basically removes like say like, a wild and like mental, and you have like both like those stun and daze effects on your character as well as like a mental one, like say like confuse. It'll also add like that confuse for like 1 in 3 chance for all being removed. And sometimes it can be really useful to have like a really powerful wild infusion, but sometimes it's just a little bit lacking because there's a lot of like better stuff you could be doing like this inscription slot to removing like wilds. Where like the wild infusion really comes into play by is the damage reduction you basically get from it. The thing about wild infusion is that they actually also grant as well as like removing like a detrimental effect. They also grant you like reduced damage input basically on your character. So you might have like say like a stun effect on you, basically remove that, and then on top of that removal, you obviously access to like 10% like less damage to yourself afterwards, which is really really nice at the start of a fight because you'll probably have like some detrimental effect basically thrown on you. You'll like tap this, get rid of the detrimental effect, and you'll have basically like reduced damage basically coming into you as a result of like removing like the talent, which is like the effect basically, which is nice. Now I'll note that basically in like the grand scheme of things, the wild infusion is as like good as it once was. It used to be that like the wild infusion is basically like really really good because there's like really nothing else to basically remove like inscriptions, but now you basically have access to Shatter like Affliction runes, which like can basically do the same thing. And there's also quite a few talents based on characters that can move like stats effects and stuff like that. So it's still important to basically have like some way of like removing like effects, but this one's like falling off the wayside as a result basically. And also there's like other stuff you could like have in favor like Stormshield Rune and stuff like that as well. So that too. Now, I'll note by the way, when you look at basically all these like effects here, it's probably more than likely you want to basically have physical early on to sort of like get rid of stuns, just because like you can basically reduce your damage by a lot and like keep yourself alive. Basically, like you get rid of stun and then you get like more durable, so like don't die for like the follow-up attacks basically get. So I probably for that basically in B tier. Mental and magical. Magical can be useful if you're basically going to fight Urkus and you basically have like basically a description specifically just for like battling Urkus perhaps. But then again, I find like Urkus usually just puts the Hurricane right back onto. Like the best way to use like the magical infusion for is to get rid of like Urkus' Hurricane that basically hits you with. It's not really like not really that great. This is like more like D tier, and the mental one's basically like very much the same as well. Then you basically have like the double, which is basically removes like 2 different effects, and that can be like challenging to use. But the thing about like while inscriptions is that because they only remove like 1 detrimental effect, they aren't that great basically to use. if like you know you have like multiple ones, you basically don't want to use like say Shatter Affliction because it has more chance to do stuff. But this one's more F tier basically, so it's basically where it is. And actually, I'm gonna move this down to C tier. I mean, I prefer like you know the healing and like Regeneration like infusions over like you know these wild ones, so that's just something for out there. And then it basically has like you know just the basic wild infusion here for some reason. I'm not really sure why. I mean, okay. I'm not sure why we're rating them, you know, basically all together, but I can see a variety out of them. So yeah, we're just gonna leave this down here. If I don't like understand why it's basically here, I'm not gonna use it. So whatever, just right there. All right, so after basically like these ones are listed, we basically have access to movement and heroism, and then the special infusion that comes after. So movement. All right, now movement infusions are probably the S tier infusion in this game. So we're immediately just gonna throw this right up to here, and I'll just explain why. So movement. This is an instant use inscription that'll basically grant you increased speed for you know 1 turn. And that like you know X basically there in like you know this description here. Basically that could be like say like 500% like you know move speed for a turn. So basically you're able to like move 5 turns wherever you want to in like you know a turn. That's like devastatingly useful for repositioning in combat, but it's also useful for getting away from combat if you need to like run away. And of course this is a roguelike, so running away is definitely always an option. But on top of the fact that you're able to move away like really fast with move inscription, it also grants you access to stun, daze, and pinning effect immunity for like a couple turns. And that's like really where just like you know inscription is all about basically. Well, besides the fact that it lets you run away. The thing about this one is that basically if you put this on before like you know fighting like a character that's basically like you know does a lot of stun, dazes, and pins, you're able to basically avoid a lot of stun, dazes, and pins and like you know really like you know deal with them. And I've like I know some people who basically like, use this basically as more like an offensive tool to sort of like get into combat and use like some other like you know means of like you know escape is like you know getting out. And it definitely works very well to basically do it like that. I personally only use them myself for like running away, but you know you can definitely use them offensively, and you know they're definitely like you know not too bad at it for sure. And I probably put a blind rune down here because I'm very bad at spelling apparently. I just noticed that, so hooray for editing right into you know the tier list. But you know that's what I basically do. Blink runes. I'll probably have to re-edit this guy by the way because blink runes aren't as like powerful as like you know the old controlled phase door rune you basically had before in the past versions. But oh well. Anyways, movement infusion S tier. There's really nothing like you know that really stands against it. Really, it's really probably one of those like you know inscription that needs a nerf, but whatever. Now, I guess I will note there is like one like you know thing to note here. The thing about movement infusion is that you can't actually use them if they're actually already pinned or stunned or like dazed. So there is that to sort of like consider. You have to be very careful, like you know, not being stunned, dazed, or pinned. So you either basically have to have like you know a halfling like indomitable will to basically like clear those, or some other means of like, getting rid of like you know pins and stazes on your character to sort of keep moving again. But you know, for the most part, this is definitely like a very powerful S tier inscription. So all I'm really gonna say about that. All right, the next one will be Heroism. And I'll note that Heroism is basically one of these like you know inscriptions that's actually been nerfed quite a bit. It used to be a lot more powerful Heroism, but now it's just like you know a little bit less than so, shall we say. But anyhow, to sort of like tell you what it is. The idea of like Heroism is basically sort of like a defensive rune that basically enlarges your health pool. So basically you might have like say 1,000 health and you might have a Heroism infusion for your character to use. If you basically tap that Heroism infusion, you're basically gonna get 1,000 life plus whatever the Heroism infusion basically grants you. So let's say it will let you get down to negative 500 like in 67 life. So you basically now have 1,567 life as a health pool to sort of work from. Basically how this works is it'll basically let you go below your like negative life rating in order to like you know get to that like you know figure. And essentially after like you know the heroism wears off basically, it'll basically reset your HP back to 1. So if you basically like you know get into a really tough fight, you get knocked below like before like your HP threshold, you might still survive because you know heroism is still is on. And it'll basically you know keep you from dying right away. And this also works for enemies, by the way, because they'll like you know avoid dying as a result of like you know being like not below their own thresholds as a result as well. But anyhow, now I note that bits used to be a lot more powerful this inscription because it used to also give you stats as well. So you might have like say like you know a boost to like all your stats as well as like getting this is like on top of it. And now just basically it's like enlarges your HP pool to be like this like bigger. It's still very good, mind you, because if you basically use this in like Regeneration or a Shield Rune or something like that, you basically make yourself really, really durable. So say like that 1,000 like character that has like the Heroism Rune, he'll just put the damage shield basically on top of him from like this shielding rune. Let's say like 500. He could have upwards of like 2,000 HP to sort of like work with and like taking a hit. So very, very like effective in like keeping yourself alive. Now, I will note there is like a couple weaknesses about Heroism that you have to basically keep in mind. It is possibly like how can I put this? Dispel, I believe, from like your Heroism, which basically like renders you like critically like vulnerable as a result of like the fact you don't have like your extra HP. But for most part, it's definitely not a bad one either because if you more health is more health, so why not? All right, so Heroism, where would I basically throw it? This was probably another B tier one because like it is useful to have alongside like say like a Regeneration like Infusion or Shielding Rune or stuff like that. It's just that like it's been nerfed quite a bit now to be like more in B tier, which is probably fine where it is basically is. Another one that probably needs to be nerfed a little bit more is probably the Movement Infusion, but whatever. And yeah, basically sort of take this from like the past like tier list basically did. S tier probably like the Infusions that need a nerf. F tier is probably the ones that need like a buff. Not really much more to say than that. I'm almost tempted to sort of take these basically out and just throw this basically down in like D tier because it does need like buff, but it is useful in some situations. Yeah, I'm gonna do that. We're just gonna take these out. So that's where I basically rate a Wild Infusion because it's basically all the way down there. All right, so that's basically it for like the normal like infusions here. There's also a couple of special ones, but we'll get to those like later. Let's talk about the runes next, I guess. So I'll note that basically for like runes basically are categorized in like 4 different ways by me here. There's basically relocation ones, offensive ones, tactical ones, and defensive ones. And those are all very distinct in what they basically do. And apparently I have teleport here to go first, so let's just go down to teleport. So that's basically where? Down here? There it is, so teleport. That's the one right there. That'd be this one right here. Alright, so teleport. Teleport basically immediately teleports you to like a tile that's basically X tiles away from your character's location. And I wonder why it basically says that. Is it because it's written here? No, so from the character location. Alright, so the idea of like teleportation, it basically is like a get out of like the situation free sort of card. But it does have a sort of cost to it because it basically randomly throws you around, like around the map basically. Let's just say you have like a teleport rune of like say 50 squares or to like 70 squares or something like that, and like you basically want to get away from say the master in like the the Driftfall Tower. The idea of like this rune is that basically it will teleport you a minimum of 15 tiles away from the like where you basically are, and it'll basically teleport you anywhere between that like that fixed number, but it's basically listed in the second value there, like on the map. This can be very good if you basically already cleared a level and you basically have like all that room to basically work with getting away from a boss. It can also be very bad because it can basically throw you into like an unclear area you haven't gone into. That's basically got a lot of monsters that are just going to kill you because you're probably escaping from when you're basically weak, and now you're basically in a situation where you're basically like weak and have monsters around you still. But I will note that basically where you can like tactically use teleport because like you've already like, cleared a level, this is a very powerful rune basically to like get you out of bad situations. It does have a sort of... Alright, my like headset going off, but I'll note that the teleport rune does have a couple of caveats to basically watch out for. One is the fact that basically runes, like the teleport rune basically is here. It can't basically be used if you're silenced or like prevent from using magic in any way. And at the same time, there's basically like this a lot of like other like runes and stuff that you can basically make use of sometimes basically work with. There's also another thing as well. The figure that this is like minimum of like 15 tiles, that basically means you move 15 tiles away from like your current location, but if you basically move like directly toward the boss and like he's basically like say like 10 tiles away, you might actually be moving like not that much far away from him. You might still be in in a battle with him, so to speak. So it's not a perfect like tool, but it works pretty well for what it basically does sometimes. So it's definitely one to basically consider. I basically consider like the teleport room to probably be like probably a C tier movement like escape option. Where it works great, but you just have to basically like, make it work for you to basically like make it work, so to speak. All right, so the next one to basically talk about is Blink. Now, I'll note that Blink, this is like the first time it's going to go on here, but back in like past versions, there are basically a couple of runes that are basically called like upgrade runes here. They're basically called Phase Door and Controlled Phase Door. And what these like runes basically did, as you can basically see here, is essentially what Blink will basically do. It basically like gives you like a random like teleport that basically gives you like negatives like stat like effect duration, stat defense boosts, resistances, and then control phase door is basically it's like this, but it lets you control where you go and you don't get the bonuses and stuff like that. And Blink Space is sort of a combination in the two, but not in a really great way, I find. So let's just talk about it. So I'll note that Blink is basically sort of like a combination of like phase door and controlled phase door. And how it basically works is it basically like lets you basically pick where you basically want to teleport to, and it also gives you like the resistance of like the phase door phase door rune. But the thing about the Blink rune here is that it does have like one negative like caveat basically going for it, and that's the fact that you basically use it in line of sight. So I'll note that basically with like both phase door and like controlled phase door, they used to be like a couple of runes you can actually use like through walls and stuff like that, which is very very powerful in order like, to get away from like fights and stuff like that. And it used to be that like a controlled phase door actually considered to be just as good as like a movement fusion in some cases. But with like the Blink rune here, you basically have to be in like line of sight, so it's not perfect. And that's the one problem like, versus say like movement fusion basically lets you go wherever you want to. This doesn't, unfortunately. So it doesn't work around like corridors and like turns and stuff like that in like a mazy like environment. So it's something to basically keep in mind. I'll note the effects basically get from this. Basically get like the status effect like reduction, increased defense, all resistances. Those are all right, but really not really what you're basically like using this like type of like rune basically for. I don't think you'd probably be used this basically into combat in order to like basically stop yourself from being like negative effect by stuff, increase your defenses, and make yourself like less like vulnerable to be attacked. It's just like a little bit like less like good than it basically was. Basically, it's like the phase door basically from like the past version was basically very very crappy, and like the control phase door was basically like all right compared to like the movement fusion. But this is just like just lacking in all regards. So that's all I can really say about it. Where I basically went back to Blink Rune in comparison to like say like the movement fusion here or the teleport, it's probably also like well, what can I say about it? In all honesty, I probably consider like the phase door rune. Does he actually have that here? Huh. I don't think he actually has a phase door rune here. Alright, well, that's something to consider, I guess. Alright, well, here's what I'm basically going to do about that. So, phase door rune, blink, whatever we want to call it. Let's go here. We're just going to open this a new window. And we're just going to copy the image. Yes, I'm literally going to make a, an image basically for us right away. So, paint. And we're just going to make this down to 1 and 1. So there's that. I don't know what size you basically use, but I assume it's probably the same size as this stuff here. So we're just going to call this Blink. And why not? We're just going to save this to pictures. That's first fine right there. And you can do this basically to other people's like, tier list, by the way. You can basically add stuff basically into it. So you can basically browse here. We're just going to go to like, pictures. We'll add in the Blink thing right here, and there we go. There's Blink. So where would I basically rate like Blink basically compared to like the other stuff? Is here's the thing, right? I'd have to say that Blink's probably like probably another D tier one. It's not completely like useless, but because it doesn't have that ability to sort of control where you basically want to go, it's just not as good as like a movement fusion, really. I mean, if it basically had like the ability to sort of like pick and choose regardless of where walls basically are, it'd be so much better basically to get away from stuff. I probably put it like up to at least A tier or even S tier basically if like it was that good, but where it is right now, it's just like not good enough. So it needs another buff as well. It's not completely unusable. It's just it needs a buff. All right, so that's basically the Blink Infusion right there, or Rune rather. And note by the way, that's another thing about the Rune by as well. If you get silenced again, you can't use it. That's something to know as well, by the way. If you are pinned or like dazed, you can use this as like, in that sort of situation. But if it's, if you're silenced, then you're not able to use it because, you can't use anything while everybody's silenced to, magic related stuff like this. Alright, the offensive runes, Acid Wave and Biting Gale. So, I'll note that in past versions, Acid Wave and Biting Gale used to be like, status debuffing talents. How they basically worked is that they used to like remove like a specific like element from your like detrimental effects. So for Acid Wave, it basically removed like mental ones, I think, or maybe it's a Biting Gale, and Acid Wave basically removed like the magical one. And there's also basically one that's basically called like Heat Beam, which basically removed like physical effects, but they're basically no longer doing that. What they basically do right now is that like you basically have Acid Wave, and it'll basically like cause like a bit of like acid damage to like target space in front of you. And when it basically does that, it'll basically cause the target to be disarmed for like 4 turns, which basically means to do less damage. I find that with Acid Wave, it's not bad Inscription, but I mean, here's the thing about Acid Wave: it's doing acid damage that is basically not commonly resisted by a lot of characters, or like enemies that you may fight in battle. And disarm can be useful against like melee fighters, but usually it's basically not like that needed. Basically, I'd rather have like a talent basically do like damage to like enemies and have it just be more like this like Inscription swap being used for like defensive purposes. The thing about like disarm is that it's not that really like effective basically against mages, so that's basically it's probably going to be killing you. I think it's like mages in this game. And when I basically consider like those like 2 factors, it's just like a bit lacking as a result. It's not that you can't use it; it's just like it's just really too niche. So I definitely consider like Acid Wave be like one of like more like worthless runes to basically say the least. So this is Acid Wave. I consider that be like our first F tier right there. I mean, when I used to get rid of like at least magical detrimental effects, no, it's still F tier. Then it's still just like it's just an F tier all around. Nothing more to say than that. All right, so the next one after Acid Wave is Biting Gale. This is very similar to like Acid Wave, but basically does a lot of other stuff. Essentially, it's like an offensive rune that basically like applies like a freeze to like the target they're basically up against, but also lowers their ability to resist stuns and like applies like the wet effect basically to them, which is basically what it does that. So when you basically apply like the wet effect, it basically makes them sort of like increasingly vulnerable to like water type effects or like stuns. So you basically freeze them again, stun them if you want, all that good stuff. Now, sort of similar to like Acid Wave, it's basically another like Inscription that like I don't find a whole lot of use for. Basically, it's useful, I guess, to sort of like stop enemies for like a moment. But I mean, that's all you're gonna do is just gonna stop them for a moment, and you're not gonna really disable that much of like the ice because it doesn't do that much damage. Just like Rune. If you have a character that's sort of a benefit from that, it can be useful. But even then, it's not useful to me, to be honest, because like I'd rather again have like Inscriptions off for defensive purposes and like one for more offensive ones. I think I'd say this is also an F tier, probably like or ahead of like Acid Wave, but it's still very F tier for sure. So that's basically where I throw that one right there. All right, so moving on from like those like 2 like lackluster ones, basically have some more tactical ones like Manasurge and the Ethereal runes right here. Now Manasurge is basically very interesting because it's sort of like needed for some like character classes. What it basically does is it basically increases your mana regeneration. So for like say an Archmage, it basically improves like your ability to like gain magic. And on top of that, it basically lets you like get surge in mana all at once. So say you basically use like say like 600 mana on like your Archmage. I'm not sure if they have that much mana, but stick with me here. He uses up like 600 like mana, and basically he uses a Manasurge Rune to basically get back 250. So effectively, what's happening is he can use this to basically get like a nice little boost in mana to sort of like keep himself going. And that's basically the main thing about like the Manasurge Rune. Basically, you can immediately get back a whole lot of mana resources basically to work with, and that might be like beneficial if like say like you get like hit by an anti-magic attack that like kills off your mana, or if you find your mana is being drained by like some like other means. So basically, Manasurge is basically sort of like your I get to continue my fight here because I still have mana to work with, so to speak, type of rune. Now, the thing about like this is that it's only restricted to like mana using classes, so there is that basically to consider. I mean, if there's basically like say like celestial light, or celestial runes, let's call them, that basically like boost up your positive and negative energies, or if there's basically sort of like a Vim rune that basically gave you like a burst of Vim and stuff like that. And then I may have a case that they basically have specific class type of runes basically here, so they're all basically sort of the same. But the thing about Masters is it basically only affects one type of character, one it basically uses magic. And magic isn't exactly that common, really, at this stage of the game, with a lot of the character classes. It's still very useful, but I mean, it's just it's very niche, to say the least. I wouldn't say a Master needs to be sort of buffed or anything. It just needs some compatriot runes basically sort of join it. So, Manasurge Rune, that's basically... Where's our Manasurge Rune? Where's the Manasurge Rune? There it is, right there. So, Manasurge is probably bottom of C tier. It's not a terrible rune. It's just there could be some more basically to join it, really. That's all I can really say about it. This sort of doesn't stand out as being why does one specific class to get this, I wonder, so to speak. You know what? Let's just roll it down to D tier, because I mean it's needed for those character classes to function, but well, it's needed for those classes to function, right? So that's the thing. I'll put it right there. All right, so after Masters we have Ethereal. All right, so Ethereal is basically this combination rune again from past versions. There used to be a rune that was basically called, let's see here. There it is, Invisibility. So this invisibility rune basically made you invisible for a certain amount of turns, and basically reduce the damage you basically inflicted. Your character yourself basically inflicted on our enemies. What this basically does in comparison to the old invisibility rune here, though, when you basically use the Ethereal Rune, you basically gain access to all resistance, you gain movement speed, and you become invisible again as well. Now, I mean, Ethereal is basically sort of an interesting rune, but it could have been made a little bit better. Maybe it lets you walk through walls or something like that. But as it basically is right now, it's just not really that it's basically a sort of a carryover, and it really needs to be thought of as one that could be reinvented, I think, from going forward, so to speak. The idea of going invisible in combat is something you think would be useful, but there's so many ways to sort of detect invisible, and can still damage stuff that is invisible that it's not that great either. Overall, I think it's basically Rune that basically is again our rework. And you know what? It's even worse than these ones as well. I've actually throw between these two, because I actually do like buying Gale a little bit. It's just it's still F tier for sure. Alright, so defensive, shielding, and storm shield, and Shatter Afflictions to some extent. Alright, so the shielding rune. Now, the shielding is basically a very samey, shall we say, rune compared to old versions of the game. And it just does what it basically does, right, as you basically say right here. It just gives you a damage shield that basically protects you from incoming attacks. And that's great. It basically preserves your HP and keeps you alive a little longer in a battle. And if you basically combine it with say Regeneration Infusion, it basically lets you get your health back while you're basically regenerating. You basically combine it with Heroism, it lets you take even bigger hits. Let's say you have that situation with the Shielding Rune and the Heroism Infusion again. So 1000 HP character has say 567 negative HP Heroism Rune, and then puts on say a 500 damage shield, so to speak, from Shielding Rune. If you basically have all that basically on at the same time, you basically have over 2000 HP. And there is attacks basically in this game that can actually hit for that much damage, by the way. So you could actually take a hit of say let's say actually on about 2000 damage all at once. Basically if you get hit for that much damage, then your 1000 character is going to die immediately. Even if you have the Heroism, you're basically going to die immediately. But if you have the Shielding Rune and Heroism Rune at the same time, you might be able at least wear the shot. And I'll note basically where I think that's a little bit absurd. Final boss of the Embers of Rage campaign. All I can say. Yes, he hits hard. Alright, so basically the Shielding Rune. This is basically a very, very powerful way of keep yourself alive. And it's basically good from the early game to the later game, because it basically protects you for quite a bit. And it basically combos with like a lot of other stuff as well. So combos with like your regeneration like infusion, combos with like your healing infusion. It combos great with like everything for the most part. And there's really not a whole lot basically more to say in that. It does what it needs to. It works with like other like category counts, much like the regeneration and like healing infusions basically do. And there is like some like aspects in this game that can sort of like break apart healing runes, which is like something to keep in mind. But overall, it works great. Except for when you get silenced, then you can't really use them runes. So, but that's a minor thing. Healing runes. That's basically right there. So, by the way, this one is with the white beam here is like magic, like reflection. So we'll get to that in a moment. But this one, another like A tier one. I'll put it just behind regeneration, but definitely very powerful for what it basically offers you. All right, so now we're gonna get on to like some of the inscriptions I'm not as familiar with, but we'll talk about them anyways. And the first of these is Stormshield. So Stormshield basically gives you protective storm around you for like 4 turns, and the storm will basically protect you from damage over a value of X up to like up Y times. So I'll note the idea of like the Stormshield is that in this game there's basically a lot of like little detrimental effects that might like inflict like a little bit of damage to you. Like say like you get by hit like say by like in a let's say here a poison. A poison does like say 26 damage to you each turn for like X number of turns. What this rune can basically do for you is it can basically preserve like your on a hit effects by like taking the hit boredom. So for example, let's say like the Storm Shield basically protects you up to like 30 damage per turn, and you basically hit by that poison. What the Storm Shield basically lets you do, it'll basically like stop you from being hit from like that sort of effect. So you don't take any of like take damage from like the from the poison. And that's really super powerful in some characters because if you combine this with say like the bone shield of like a reaver or a corruptor, you'll basically keep the bone shield alive and intact, while basically like the poison basically ticks down slowly. And being able to keep your bone shields intact for like bigger attacks is like nightmarishly powerful for the most part. So definitely worth considering. Um, it's basically a way of like sort of stopping you from dying. But there's some things to basically note here. If you basically get hit by like talents like say Flurry, they'll basically shred through a Storm Shield with like nothing basically to stop you because there is like a limit to the amount of like hits this guy can take. And at the same time, you're gonna be having so many enemies to hit you at some point that like it's like gonna be like sort of like functionless because like you're being hit by too much, so to speak. What to say about the Storm Shield? I'm actually trying to decide where I want to throw this. Basically, it's basically a rune that basically it looks like it does something very good, but at the same time, would I basically like take this over say like a regeneration like infusion or like a shielding rune for example? I mean, if you have like an extra inscription slots, it's very useful to use, like say on an ogre, but outside of that, not really sure. So Storm Shield, there is Storm Shield right there. Now, it's actually something worth knowing as well, by the way. This is actually also another rune right here, Storm Shield, that's actually like, been grandfathered in after like, another one's basically retired. And that would be, let's see here, retired infusions, or upgrade runs, retired runes. Is an upgrade here? Yeah, okay, there is. So, not by the way, like the past versions, there's this like, rune called the Lightning Infusion. And that basically had Heat Beam, Acid, like Wave. You have like, Frost Spear, I guess it was, or whatever. And you have like this one for like lightning. And they do have like these runes that basically have like 4 different types of offensives you can basically use. And the thing here about like lightning is that basically it's just sort of like an offensive rune that basically lets you like jump around for like a few turns if like you got hit, once per turn, which is very nice. But the thing about like this like rune basically here, Storm Shield. The idea for it is basically like it can let you like absorb like bad hits to yourself, so you basically can like keep your other stuff intact. It is useful for that purpose, but it's very niche as well. So I wouldn't say it's like a terrible rune. Basically, what it basically does is just like it feels like there's like others that could be stronger than it. So I had someone off there for a little bit, but yeah, I'm gonna basically throw this at the bottom like C tier. It feels like it could be like better than what it basically currently offers, but it's not bad if you like have the characters that really benefit from it. So all I can really say about that. All right, the Shatter's Afflictions Rune. Now, from like the new versions of this game, this is probably my favorite like rune basically to pick up. When you basically use this rune, it'll basically cleanse 1 random detrimental physical effect, 1 random detrimental mental effect, and 1 random detrimental magical effect from the character. And along with this, it'll basically remove all those cross-tier effects that basically like associated with those like detrimental effects. When you do this, you'll get a damage shield for each of those effects basically cleared, counting the cross-tier effects, and like it'll basically like make you a little bit stronger as a result of it. So basically, you get hit by a bunch of detrimental effects. This basically takes those like detrimental effects, cleanses like a few of them, and gives you a shield basically based off like those basically cleansed. I'll note that basically like compared to like the wild infusions that basically were listed above, this is really nice basically for getting rid of like multiple bad effects basically all at once. And like early on, that can be really useful for like getting rid of like say a confuse and like a stun basically all at the same time. And like even later on, it's still pretty useful. Now, is it as useful like later on when like stuff basically is throwing you like inscriptions like left and right, and like you have lots of immunities and stuff like that? Probably no, but early on, this is definitely a lifesaver to basically consider, and it's definitely one I basically consider to like put on your character if like you can use it basically early on in the game. Not really a whole lot more basically saying that, especially just awesome for what it basically does. It's definitely like an A tier class like inscription. So there's Shatter things right there. I wouldn't say it's better than like the Shielding Rune, but it's definitely right up there as being like a really great like inscription to use. So yeah, let's throw it right there, A tier. All right, so that actually like covers all like the basic like infusions and like runes basically find in the game. There is, however, still like quite a bit more to go through, as you can basically see here. A lot of these like ones over here by the way, they're basically all like solves, so that basically goes right there. And then you basically have like the Steam implant from like the Embers of Rage campaign to compare as well. There's also these taints over here. I'm not sure why it has the Devour one over here, but he's got that here, I guess. All this stuff basically over here. So let's reorganize this stuff to be like I'll put this right here. I'll put this right here. Why has he got this here? Is that what he basically chose for the phase dual rune, I wonder? Interesting. Maybe it is, but like the icon basically used for like phase door, but I'm pretty sure that like this was basically the like the picture for like the controlled phase door rune, but I'm pretty sure it's basically gone at this point. So I'll put it right there. I'm not gonna use that one because it's retired, so won't worry about it. I can go right here. So yeah, I'll note basically there's stuff basically here. We got like magic like reflection. We got the primal infusion. I'm pretty sure that's basically the dissipation rune you basically get from like Anglum. We basically complete the storm of Durf or whatever. The storm's basically like the Darkest quest. We have a mirror image I think right there. We got the one from the Temple Warden. I'm pretty sure that's the prismatic rune over here. These are basically all like artifact basically ones you can basically get. So let's just throw this right over here maybe. We'll cover it basically at some point, but I think it's basically good for like a part one of like going through like descriptions. Those are like the basic ones you basically come across. So yeah, that's basically I rate basically mostly like the basic descriptions here a little bit. But a lot of it's basically like really changed the course of what basically like happens basically after that. So we'll cover them next. So until then, we'll take care of like this in part one. And just to sort of throw the caveat basically in here because I sort of forgot to mention at the beginning of this video, I'm a normal Nightmare player. I don't have insane experience as much as like other players do, so this might be like not as like worthy for like insane difficulty, just like ratings here. Keep that in mind. But other than that, I think I'm fairly confident in like, saying like I fairly good understand basically how runes and infusions work. All right, so I'll see you guys in part two. Take care.